All right, how's that for eye candy? That's the inside of the IF can of a National NC-57. Now, on the right lower left-hand corner, you can see the solder connection is very bright and shiny, and that's because on this model, I actually unsoldered that cap and lifted it up and found out that that cap was okay. One of the other coils underneath it has all kinds of notes around it. The guy, I lost signal here. He had a bad capacitor. So while I found he had a bad cap, it was leaky with my high voltage tester after I removed the cap from the IF can. You can't measure the caps when they're across the coil. You can if you have a signal generator and you know how much signal you should get out of the other side. It would be something you've done a lot of these radios and you wrote that down. Yes, then you could. But anyway, this is your eye candy. Look at that IF can. That IF can is like nothing you ever seen before. All three IF cans have dart bottoms, and I'll probably mess the focus up. See that? That's a dart bottom. You push that in, and this dart opens up in the hole and holds the cabinet on, the case on. Then at the top, let's hope the focus stays, right? These two, you adjust slugs up and down, and there's locking nuts on it. But I can tell you right now, the only way those two coils can communicate with each other is through the air. Look at the gap. Look how far apart those coils are. Now, what helps those coils out is the slugs. The slugs help transfer the signal sideways. You get a very weird pattern when you do that. The person that designed this IF can really knew what they were doing. And all three IF cans in this radio have a different part number. Now, if I took two more apart, you would notice that the coils would be closer together or further apart. That coil looks like the one that doesn't move. This is probably the one that each model, they move this coil up and down. And that's to get, you get better Q because it's a bigger coil. But in other words, the coupling, as you go through the radio, after the first mixer, you want the coupling to be wide. And then the next IF can, you want it to get narrower, and then the third even more narrower. And if you look at these IF cans, on some of these NC-57s, the second coil, the secondary, has 3 windings on it, not just 2. It's coming back to me when I was working on these radios. I said, they really did something special here. And I told you at the last video, all of a sudden I got into these these BC348s, not realizing that I had one of the Holy Grail AM broadcast receivers in my possession. I have 3 of these, and all 3 are slightly different with each model number. One doesn't have the backlash gear on the main dial. One doesn't allow you to really adjust the dial in. See, this one has a coil and a capacitor for each band, and what you do is you put a low frequency signal in on the band, and you go down and you tune your coil until it's on the mark. Then you go all the way up in frequency, and then you adjust your capacitor. You go back and forth until they're both on the line. The dial will then be within 1%. That's really incredible for a cheap shortwave radio. Let's just call it cheap. It's not a digital radio. It's older. This radio, in its final production, I don't know which way the quality went, but in other words, I have ones that I'm really happy with. I have one where I can't adjust the main dial in more than turning in a capacitor. But there's your eye candy. There's an IF can. I don't care how many IF cans you've taken apart, but this one's totally different than all of them. And I went looking. I found a national manual for their parts for 1957, 47. Well, anyway, it didn't show this IF can in it. I'll go dig. But as soon as I started opening this up, I'm like, and flipped over the chassis, I said to myself, oh, I remember this one. This is the one where the guy, he did all kinds of tests. He couldn't figure out why he had low signal. And his capacitor, even if he unsoldered it, was only good, or was good at lower resistance scales or higher resistance scales. But I have that high voltage capacitor detector that I use, and I put a DC 300 volts across the capacitor through a neon bulb. And if the neon bulb even glows a little bit, the capacitor is bad. Now the genius with his bow tie, with his $40,000 lab, he has out a capacitor tester that only uses 30 volts. I simulated the circuit real quick. It didn't find the ones that I find bad. You have to use the working volts of the capacitor, especially the ones that look like the stoplight or domino ones. They do go bad. Now, what's good about these IF cans is you don't get silver mica disease in those little bases. The capacitor itself shorts out. It gets silver mica disease within itself. And it's very easy. And that's what was wrong with this chassis. And as soon as I got this radio working, I kept it on the bench. I was absolutely happy with it. And then I told you I spotted a message from someone about a BC348. He goes, "You got to check this radio out." And I checked it out. I'd never seen one before. You know, in my circle of friends when I was younger, you're lucky to see a color television when I was younger. Everybody had junk. They bought the cheapest of everything. And you rarely saw anything when I was a kid that one of the other kids would have that was really sensational. Now, the one family did have some pretty good trains, but that's only because my parents didn't buy me better ones. They bought me the cheapest junk. But eye candy, enjoy that IF can. That's why this radio, it's one of the reasons this radio works better. I would say it's probably that's why it's so sharp. I showed you on the dial. Why is that station so narrow when you're tuning it? That's because it's got a real IF system. See, your Halcrafters, they use the same IF can all the way through the radio, same part number. So it doesn't really narrow up what would be the selectivity of the radio. See, you have to have sensitivity. That gets you the station. Then selectivity gets you the station, a weak station if it's next to a strong station. It lets you listen to it without hearing any splatter. And that's about it. I think that's it. All right, I hope you enjoyed the candy.